Welcome to the ANEW Insight Podcast, empowering and inspiring your journey to optimal health. Hosted by Dr. Supatra Tovar, clinical psychologist, registered dietitian, fitness expert, and author of Deprogram Diet Culture. Rethink your relationship with food, heal your mind, and live a diet-free life. I follow my guests' journey to optimal health, providing you with the keys to unlock your own wellness path. Tune in and evolve with us. Hello and welcome, everyone. I am so glad to have Mark Faulkner with us today. He is the founder of CON-CRÄT Creatine HCl. For those who are listening, it's spelled CON-CRET, and the E has a macron or a little line over the top, so you know it's concrete and not concrete. Mark, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Appreciate you having me on.
Yes. So I'm going to read a little bit about Mark, and then I really wanted to delve into all things creatine beyond just the gym. There's a lot of things out there, new research, information that creatine can be very helpful for us as we age. And so I wanted to delve into that with him. Mark Faulkner is the founder and president of Vireo Systems, and he's the inventor behind CON-CRÄT Creatine HCl, one of the most widely recognized forms of creatine hydrochloride on the market. Mark began his career co-founding a forensic toxicology lab that helped develop the NFL's steroid-testing program, while also working with the Olympic and NCAA athletes. His passion for helping athletes find safer, more effective performance solutions eventually led him to groundbreaking research on creatine hydrochloride and the creation of CON-CRÄT. Today, Mark focuses on advancing research around creatine's roles not only in physical performance, but also in brain health, cognition, recovery, healthy aging, and overall wellness. Mark, welcome.
Thank you very much.
So, as I said before, many people really associate creatine with bodybuilding, building muscles, the manosphere, the whole deal. Tell me how this conversation around creatine has evolved in recent years.
Certainly. And it certainly has been evolving, because about 20 years ago, I first said to some people that creatine is the most important supplement people can take. And they kind of looked at me like, oh, that sounds like somebody that, is biased for creatine and would kind of forget about protein, vitamin D, magnesium, fish oil, all the wonderful supplements that are out there that are very important to the health of the body. But what I told them, and what now the conversation is evolving to, and what people are understanding, is that it really is fundamentally the most important supplement, because all those nutrients that I mentioned are very healthy and helpful to the body, but none of them matter much if the cells don't have optimal energy and have enough energy to use those nutrients fully. And the rate limiting molecule on cellular energy is creatine. So you have to have creatine in order for the body to most effectively, most efficiently use all those other nutrients. So that's why I've continued to say, and people are finally starting to understand that, yes, foundationally, it's the most important for overall health.
But why a supplement, and why not get it naturally? And what are the ways that people have been getting it naturally?
Certainly. I always think that getting any nutrient naturally through the food sources is best. Unfortunately, though, 65% of Americans don't eat enough of the food sources that contain creatine, that would then give them the creatine stores that they need for overall cellular health in the body. The sources are red meat, but it has to be rare to raw, because as soon as you cook meats, the creatine is largely compromised. There are some fish like herring that have creatine in them, but plants and other things are very low in creatine. And other meats have some creatine in them, but not as much as some of the ones that I just mentioned. So that if someone is a vegan or vegetarian, or eats well-done meat, or just simply as a part of a heart-healthy, low cholesterol, low-fat diet, doesn't consume that much in the way of creatine containing rich red meat or something, they're not going to have enough. And so that supplementation becomes important. It is necessary in order for them to have the cellular energy. It doesn't mean if you don't have full stores of creatine that your body isn't functioning. It's just not functioning optimal.
So, can you explain how creatine works in the body and why it also may benefit brain health and cognitive performance?
Certainly. Creatine is the molecule that the body uses to recycle ATP, or adenosine triphosphate. And ATP in the body is the universal energy molecule. It's what every cell uses as fuel to function, to operate, to run, to do its performance, whether it's the heart cells to beat, the brain cells to think, the muscle cells to work or whatever. And ATP is not made very rapidly in the body. It comes out of the Krebs cycle, or the citric acid cycle of the body. And because it takes a while for the body to make ATP, when the cells burn ATP and it becomes ADP, it goes from adenosine triphosphate to adenosine diphosphate, or two phosphates, with a loose phosphate kicked off. Creatine comes along as the recycling molecule, grabs that spare phosphate that the ATP kicked off, recombines it to the ADP to again make it ATP, a usable fuel source for the cells. And that way there's rapid regeneration of that fuel molecule, that energy source for all cells. And that's what its job is. It is to fuel cellular energy in the body so that a cell can recover or can operate or can function as effectively and efficiently and optimally as possible. The reason why it's important for the brain is that the brain cells, the neurons in your brain, use upwards of 20% of the body's creatine just to think, just for basic cranial functions. And if, as I said earlier, it doesn't mean that your brain isn't working if you don't have optimum creatine stores. It's just that your neurons and all of that synapse firing and all of the things that happen in the brain don't happen as quickly or as effectively. So we see people having more brain fog when there are lower levels of creatine in the body, or where there's some sort of challenge to the creatine usage in the body and the demands that are being put on some of the cells. So very important for cognition and for neuron effectiveness, and very important for overall cellular health.
So how then do you explain the blue zones that are primarily whole food plant-based, places like Okinawa, where there's very little red meat that's eaten? They don't really have herring there. And they're some of the longest lived, best cognitively functioning adults. How do you explain that if they are not necessarily getting creatine from the sources that you claim, but are doing very well, well into, hundreds of years, 100 years old?
Yeah, very good question. And two things. A, I am not an epidemiologist and not a physician, so I will opine a little bit on this, but that's not an area that I've done much research in. I would suggest that over hundreds, thousands of years, the people living in those zones have developed probably a cellular efficiency that is unique to their lives, their biocultures, and their food sources. There's also a number of people that are in those areas that are eating lots of raw or lightly prepared fruits, vegetables, even fish and other things, where the conglomeration of small undestroyed creatine stores in those products and those plants and those food sources is able to help supplement. But one very interesting thing about the body is that it will kind of regulate itself to some degree up and down in terms of its creatine production. And that's where the evolution of those folks, they may have developed a process or internal biochemistry that's naturally making a little more creatine. Nobody ever makes all that they need because it's supposed to come from food sources in terms of the balance that the body doesn't make. For us in America, the body makes about half, with our culture and our food sources, about half of the creatine that we need to supply our body with ample stores. And if you take a lot of creatine as a supplement, your body will downregulate and make less. It never goes to zero. So if you stop taking the supplements, it will increase its production back up. But again, it never gets to 100% because it expects some food sources to provide creatine. I would just guess that that the bodies of the folks in the blue zones, as you say, have optimized the level that the body is making, and then the food sources and the way they prepare the food and other kind of, as I say, epidemiological sorts of influences are helping them be healthy and live long. They also probably don't have some of the same toxin exposures that challenge the immune system that we have. Americans have a lot that challenges our immune system, and we can probably get into it later that how important creatine is to our T cells, to our immune cells, to keep us healthy from a viral, bacterial, oncology standpoint. So
Yes.
I think that's just an estimate.
Yes. So if there are any epidemiologists out there who are listening, you might want to ask that question or pose that question in the blue zone of Loma Linda, California, where we do have a lot of those toxins, and yet the people are living long and healthy lives who are, either vegetarian or even vegan. Some, also do have meat every once in a while, but mostly vegetarian and vegan group, and they are some of the healthiest, long-lived people in the world. So scientists, get on that because we need that answer. That's why we love you guys. Speaking of science, we're seeing a lot of research around creatine and mental performance. Like you said, what are some of the most exciting findings out there right now?
Yeah. I would say that more consumers new consumers coming into the creatine space are interested in exactly that topic: cognition, mental performance, avoidance of brain fog, deterrence of dementia, cognitive decline, and things. And I would say one of the most interesting and exciting studies that have come out recently is one that appeared in the Journal of the American Nutrition Association, JANA. It was done by probably the top creatine researcher in the world, a fellow by the name of Dr. Sergey Ostoich. And he is an MD, PhD, focused on all sorts of research, but a lot of his research over the past, half dozen, 10 years has been on creatine and creatine as it's associated with cognition and mental performance. What he demonstrated was, and he was focusing on, in this study that Jana published this past fall, he was focusing on menopausal women because there's so much concern with women about brain fog, mental fatigue, and other symptomology that accompanies that stage of a woman's life, really from perimenopause to postmenopause all through. And what he demonstrated was that low levels of creatine, specifically creatine hydrochloride, would be able to, without any side effects, increase brain energy metabolism and brain creatine levels in such a way that there was significant increases in alertness, in cognition, in cranial performance for various activities and things. Also a downregulation of moods and other symptomology that sometimes accompanies menopause. But that idea that an efficient small dose of creatine could have that sort of improved biochemistry in the brain is very exciting. And again, that was published in JANA. I would also say that one of the things that most negatively affects many people on cognition and mental performance are unfortunately TBIs and concussions. There are more and more people that are having concussions, whether it's sports related, in the military, or folks that just have had some sort of, whether it's through car wreck or other brain trauma or something, that are having ongoing challenges to their cognition because of those traumatic brain injuries. And there's a study that's not yet finished, but I got an early peek at some of the results. And it showed that prophylactic levels, low levels of creatine, and specifically creatine hydrochloride in this case, were able to kind of buffer the damage to the synapses, and that the synapse protection that the creatine is providing when TBIs or when concussion protocols are executed is very exciting. Because if creatine can help to buffer and to protect and to insulate the brain from some of the traumas that are happening, that's very exciting. So those are a couple of things: the brain energy metabolism, the brain protection. Those are
Yeah. I can't imagine it being able to protect enough for like an NFL blow, like you probably saw when you were working with them. But maybe some added protection. There's I mean, just a whole slew of difficulties going on for people. Even I had somebody on my podcast who was a USA Olympic bobsledder who has so much traumatic brain injury that he's had so many difficulties functioning. He's done a lot of research in that. Hyperbaric oxygen therapy actually is really helping him a lot. But back to that Jana study, I'm curious if you happen to know what was the population studied of these menopausal women? What did they primarily, like, what was their demographic? Did they actually look at their nutrition status as well?
What they try to do is to focus it only on what would be the effects of creatine. From a demographic standpoint, I think the ages were from the mid 40s to probably upwards of mid 50s to nearly 60. And they were women with symptomology, menopause symptomology, and they didn't want them to do anything really different from a nutritional or a physiological, physical fitness standpoint, so that they could track any changes as really being inherent to the creatine treatments and therapies that were being implemented. So there was a specific demographic. There was a cross section of women from different socioeconomic backgrounds, so they would have potentially different dietary and activity profiles. But it was. The main thing is they wanted them to be static in everything else in their life as normal to see the effects of creatine.
Right. Were they all American?
No, it was a mix. It was an international mix.
Okay. I would really love to see that. If you wouldn't mind sending me that would
be happy to.
Interesting to me. Because also back to the blue zones, it's really interesting. They don't have a word for menopause in Okinawa. Which I was like, really? Why? And they don't experience menopause symptoms like, people who are having the, standard American diet and living in more westernized countries. So I did a lot of poking around in there. Yeah. And, one of the big keys is that they eat a lot of soy, which is a phytoestrogen, and they eat a lot of kelp, which helps to support thyroid function. So people, if you're looking to get a little bit extra help along with some creatine, eat a lot of soy.
The soy isoflavones are great modulators of the female endocrine profile.
Yes. So give me a little picture of what led you to focus specifically on creatine hydrochloride instead of the more traditional creatine monohydrate.
Well, we actually initially did focus on creatine monohydrate. The athletes that we were working with the NFL, NCAA, et cetera, when I was with the forensic toxicology laboratory and doing the steroid testing and things, they needed something to help them with their performance. As they said, we're in the equivalent of multiple car wrecks every weekend. we have to get up on Tuesday morning and be able to do our job, or there's a dozen people waiting to take our roster spot. And this is how we feed our families. And it could end at any time with an injury or whatever. So we have to be able to have the strength and the endurance, and particularly the recovery necessary. And right now, nothing else on the market, including creatine monohydrate, provides what we need from a performance enhancement the way that steroids do. But steroids, not safe, not healthy, not legal. So they said, try to find something for us. So we did start with monohydrate, and we saw pretty quickly that one of the reasons why that creatine in the monohydrate form wasn't able to address what these elite athletes needed was because they just couldn't get enough in their system. It didn't have the absorption necessary to fuel all of their muscles without there being some side effects. Creatine monohydrate is a fine molecule, and it will saturate the muscles. And you can get a fair bit into your system, but you have to take so much to do so, because only about 15% of a dose of creatine monohydrate is actually making it to the bloodstream. And the other 85% is just being excreted. The creatine that gets to your bloodstream does great things for the muscles and for all the cells. However, at that sort of elite athlete level, the body trying to excrete the other 85% caused real issues of cramping, GI distress, fluid redistribution that ended up having dehydrating effects. People talk about, creatine draws water into your muscles. Yes, it does. But unfortunately, while it's doing that, the creatine that gets in your bloodstream is doing that. The other 85% is pulling water from other cells and from the rest of the body, trying to flush that out. And so the body gets quickly to where it wants to retain water so that it has it ready to flush that out and still keep the muscles able to perform. And that's where the bloat, the GI distress, the puffiness and things were all symptomologies that the athletes just didn't find helpful. Yes, if you're wanting to have strength and bulk, creatine monohydrate is a good molecule. But for many of the skill positions, you want strength and leanness, and creatine monohydrate wouldn't perform for that. So we started looking at other forms of creatine. We started looking at peptides and other amino acid molecules and things. And we didn't, as I say, initially focus on creatine hydrochloride because it was an accident. We were working towards making another pronutrient. We were trying to synthesize a compound that was supposed to have different properties. And on January 23rd of 2003, we calculated the wrong amount of acid catalyst to go in a batch for this one amino acid-based compound, this peptide. And what resulted was this crystal that we could tell wasn't what we were trying to make. And I was like, doggone it, because it was an expensive mistake. We set it aside, went back to making, figured out what we did wrong. Okay, add more acid catalyst this time to help drive the reaction properly. And it was probably a month later, we went back to this other crystal and we're like, well, what was this anyway? And come to find out, that which we made by mistake was creatine hydrochloride. And we started, when we chemically identified it and then started studying it and saw that, wow, its properties, its stability, its solubility, its plasma uptake, its bioavailability and absorption were all remarkable and were much superior to creatine monohydrate or any of the other forms of creatine that we had studied. And ultimately, we saw this molecule able to be dosed in small concentrated measures, was able to deliver more creatine to the cells without the side effects, which would then drive the strength, the endurance, and the performance that these elite athletes needed. And so wow. Even though creatine hydrochloride and CON-CRÄT isn't commonly known to consumers, it's been very well known in the specialty retail elite athlete ranks for 20 years. So,
and is it what's being used in all of these scientific studies, or is it the monohydrate being used in these studies?
Well, creatine monohydrate oftentimes is properly billed as the most studied supplement, which it is. What they don't also say, though, is that creatine monohydrate, still a good molecule, but it also has the most failed studies where you couldn't dose enough and get enough into the system because of those absorption challenges to have the therapeutic effects that it was theorized creatine should have in some medical study or another medical indication or something. And so even though creatine monohydrate has had the most studies, most of those studies have been exercise physiology and muscle performance, and it does great in those, as long as you can put up with some of the side effects that many people experience, the bloat, the water retention, et cetera. But for the medical studies, more and more of those are being done with creatine hydrochloride these days because of the efficiency of the dosing, the ability to deliver more to the cells, and therefore to drive positive clinical outcomes in a number of medical indications that creatine has previously been theorized to help. Things like Huntington's disease, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ALS, a number of different types of medical indications. Even we've got some oncologists that are using it and finding success with.
Wow, fascinating. Wow, we're out of time for this half, but I have so many more questions about that. That's actually really, really interesting and incredible that you made it by mistake, but sometimes mistakes can be our greatest benefit. So will you come back for the second half and illuminate us some more, Mark?
Absolutely, honored to do so.
Wonderful. And thank you everyone for joining us. Stay tuned for the second half of this conversation with Mark Faulkner as we continue to explore creatine, brain health, cognitive performance, recovery, and the future of science-backed supplementation.
Thanks for tuning into the ANEW Insight Podcast. Please remember, the contents shared on this podcast is for entertainment purposes only and does not constitute medical advice. Tune in next time and evolve with us.